Welcome back, my luxurious fleet. The Lexus nomenclature used to make perfect sense. It was very clear and straightforward. Nowadays, we're in a big mess. I'll see you on the other side. Hit that like button and let's get into it. The Lexus naming scheme or nomenclature has a tradition of being very simple, straightforward, and easy to remember. It was always correlated with the model and engine displacement. Lexus does continue the original naming scheme, but to a small extent. They still use the model number first on all of their cars. For example, LS equals luxury sedan, and NX equals nimble crossover. However, the number following the model designation has become quite unclear in these modern days, thanks to forced induction, hybrid models, and Lexus just wanting to make their newer cars sound bigger and better than their older cars. I hope you have your snacks and drinks because this is going to be a long one as we get into the convoluted mess of the modern day Lexus nomenclature or naming scheme that had once been very simple, straightforward, and sensical. Before we get into the really confusing parts, we're just going to get into the parts that make the most sense and have always made a lot of sense. So let's just start with the LX. LX450, the LX470, 570, all logical. The GX470 and the 460 both make sense. The ES, all the ES models from the 250, 300, 330, 350, 300H, all made sense. The RX models, there's a lot of them as well, just like the ES, even the L variants still make sense. UX, the brand new UX 200 and 250H still make a lot of sense. All the GS models, which I think there's more GS models than there's any other model for Lexus because there's all sorts of V8s, there's hybrids, there's tons of different V6s, and I wouldn't be surprised if they have turbo variants of the 4-cylinder as well. Those all make pretty good sense. Even the LC500, right? 5-liter V8, LC500, that makes sense. However, we're not going to touch much on the LC500H. Instead, we're going to talk about its platform share, the LS500H. Okay, so now that we got the ones that make sense out of the way, let's get into the ones that make a lot less sense. The first one we're going to talk about is the fairly new NX for Lexus. This car originally debuted in 2004 as a 2015 model. It had two variants. You had the brand new 2.0 liter turbo inline 4. It was the first turbo motor in the United States for Lexus. Hence, it's named the 200T, right? 2 liters T turbo. Kind of makes sense. It also had the hybrid variant with the 2.5 inline 4 paired with the electric motors. The 300H is an odd one because in the past, there had never been a hybrid model with a higher number than a standard version that performed worse than the base model. For example, the RX 450H always had been more powerful, had a little bit more juice than the RX 350 non-hybrid. The ES 300H always was down on power to the 350 V6 variant. And lastly, the LS 600H had a powerful, more powerful motor than the LS 460, had a bigger V8 with the electric motors. So all those hybrids in the past had made sense. This was kind of shaking it up for the first time, not following with the standard logic of the Lexus nomenclature. Now we had a model with a bigger number than the base model that performed significantly worse with the NX 300H. But that's just the tip of the iceberg for the NX. This one is probably out of all the vehicles the most convoluted, hardest to understand, and just there's a lot of things that don't make sense with the naming of the NX. In 2018, they refreshed the NX with new numbers, wheels, new bumpers. Yeah, numbers too. I'll get into that in a second. Bumpers, wheels, and infotainment, which helped the vehicle stay pretty updated. Unfortunately, it confused the heck out of potential buyers because the name changed despite the power plants being identical. The NX 200T had become a 300. They dropped the T and increased the 200T to a 300, even though it was the exact same engine and setup. My only conclusion on why they did this was to generate additional buzz around the 2018 model refresh. 2 years later, every salesperson has to explain the quizzical nomenclature on the NX to every potential buyer on the NX. This extremely questionable move has been repeated in the upcoming models, so let's keep going. In the RC, in 2016, We had a 200T model, we had a 300 with a 3.5 liter V6 and a 350. But let's just back up. The RC debuted in 2014 as a 2015 model, similar to the NX. They came out at the same time. For 2016, they introduced the RC200T, or the RC Turbo. It's the same car. It had the same motor plus a little more power from what you saw in the NX. The RC300 V6, which we'll dive more into in a minute, was also debuted in 2016. And of course the RC350, which was the original car back in 2015. However, the RC300 also had a 3.5 liter V6, making about 50 less horsepower than the RC350. There's some logic in this scheme, and that the lower power model is lower in number, right? 300 and 350. However, they have the same displacement, so it's really, really confusing. I wish they just would have renamed the 350 and renamed the 350 like a 350 Plus or RC 350S. That would have made more sense because they both accurately depict the displacement of the motor. But no, that would have made too much sense, right? But it gets even better. In 2018, Lexus renamed the RC 200T, aptly named for the 2.0 liter inline 4 turbo, to the RC 300, and now we have two RC 300s. However, the only distinction between the RC 300 with the turbo 4 and the RC 300 with the V6 was that the V6 came standard all-wheel drive, and the RC 300 turbo 4 came standard and only available in rear-wheel drive. How terribly confusing is that? That is something I'm still trying to get my head wrapped around. The RC 350, however, remains the same. It can come in rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive. Let's just get the RC out of the way and let's just get into the new car because my mind's starting to fall apart at this point. The IS sports sedan has been around for a long time for Lexus. Throughout the IS history, we've had the IS 250, the 300, in the very first generation that matched their respective engine displacement. Second generation sported the IS 250 and 350 here in America. ISF we won't talk much about because that's a different naming thing altogether. In 2008, the IS 250C and 350C debuted, which is the only Lexus cars to use the C in their nomenclature, but it makes sense because C stood for convertible, right? And the car was a convertible, so that made a whole lot of sense. In 2015, for the 2016 model year, the IS got rid of the 250 and the 2.5 liter V6 as a result, and they replaced it with the 2.0 turbo. Okay, great. The 2.0 turbo, we all know what's going to happen. It's going to come out as a 200T, and they're just going to change the name like all the other cars that they did in about 2018. And that's exactly what happened. So for the 2015 model of the IS 200T, that's what it called with the Turbo 4. The RC was rear-wheel drive, just like the IS 200T and 300 is. The IS 300 was the all-wheel drive 3.5 liter V6 that we ranted about just a second ago in the RC. Of course, the IS 350 returned with rear-wheel drive and all-wheel drive, just like the RC as well. In 2017, guess what happened? Just like the NX and the RC, the 200 variant, the 200T variant was done away with, and the IS 300 was debuted. So now you have an IS 300 that's a rear-wheel drive with a Turbo 4. You have an IS 300 that's all-wheel drive with a 3.5 liter V6, and then you have an IS 350 with another 3.5 liter V6, just like we saw in the RC. If you understand one of them, you kind of understand the rest. The NX is just a mess in itself, but the RC and the IS are very, very parallel with their nomenclature. At least there is some continuity there between those two models. And the last model we're going to get into is the LS. LS, our beloved luxury sedan, naming scheme was perfect until 2017 with the redesign LS 500. Let's go back to 1989, the year of my birth, as well as the birth of Lexus. The LS 400 started the whole Lexus party off with the 4.0 V8, the 1U ZFE, legendary motor. make sure to click this little button up here to see my top Lexus V8s. But let's get back to this one. It was succeeded by the 4.3 liter 3U ZFE that we saw in the LS430, also a legendary car and motor. And that was succeeded by the LS460 with a 4.6 liter V8 with the 1UR FSE. Even the ultra expensive LS600HL that we saw in that era of the LS460 made sense. It had a 5 liter V8 and also had electric motors, which pumped up the nomenclature to 600. So far so good with the naming scheme, right? We're good up until 2017. This all went to hell in a handbasket in 2018 with the introduction of the newly redesigned, and I love the car, the LS500. You would think it would have a 5 liter V8, right? With the traditional nomenclature, 500 should stand for 5.0 liters. However, it didn't come with a 5 liter V8, it came with a 3.5 liter V6 twin turbo that made more power than all the previous V8s that you saw in the LS. The problem is, 3.5 liter doesn't make a whole lot of sense being called a 500. So why did they name it the 500? Well, who in their right mind shopping for a brand new LS would buy an LS 350? There's never been an LS named anything lower than a 400, right? So it feels like the buyer is getting shafted, or they're buying a lesser product, or hey, some old geezer saying, does that have the same motor as the ES 350? Instead, Lexus slapped a 500 brand on their brand new 3.5 liter twin turbo V6 to convince buyers that it is more powerful than the outgoing 460. And this is a lot more powerful than the 460, of course. The issue I have is that 3.5 liter doesn't make sense. 3.5 liters is not 500. It should be 350. So how should have Lexus named it? Well, I don't have a perfect answer for you. I'll see in the comments on how you think Lexus should have named it the LS 500. They could have stuck with 500 right? 500's an option. I think they should have named it maybe the LS 350 TT because it's the first twin turbo motor for Lexus, or it could have been just called the LS TT. That'd be kind of cool, kind of a separation. And that would take out all the ambiguity. People thinking it's a 5 liter V8, and just being like, oh yeah, this is the first twin turbo motor from Lexus. They're really proud of it. They've designed the whole car around it, and this is the new LSTT. Like, I don't know. It's just 500 does not correlate with 3.5 liters, right? So I'll see in the comments below on what you think they should have named the LS500. Oh, and let's not forget the LS500H. Oh no. The LS500H also has a 3.5 liter V6 with electric motors and a super cool dual transmission with a traditional auto 4-speed automatic transmission with a CVT to blend it all together. It's pretty extraordinary what they're able to do with it, but it has an H at the end. At least they made it logical in that they kept the H for the hybrid, but it still just doesn't add up, right? I think that should sum it up for you guys. Thanks to forced induction hybrids, as well as Lexus's questionable decisions to inflate their model numbers, has left us all with a tangled mess of models and motors to deal with. If I missed a model and a flawed naming scheme for that model, please let me know in the comments below. I hope I was able to help you understand this really confusing modern naming scheme from Lexus. It used to be so straightforward and evident what their models stood for. Now we couldn't be any further from the simple beginnings that the brand started on. Let me know your thoughts down below. Hit that like button, of course, if you liked the video. And hit that like button if you think Lexus could do a better job with their naming scheme. I think they could, but it's too late at this point. You can't really go back, but we'll see what happens. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button if you haven't, and I'll see you in the next video. Peace.